So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Patrick, Sam, Talita, and the whole incredible team behind the ASSA 2018, and also to the Land of Brave for the warm welcome so far. So thank you very much, because I feel very blessed. And since I've arrived, I've been in WOW. So I'm based in UK, but I'm from Senegal, which we have, in terms of arts and culture, we have our reputation, which we can be proud of, but we have not much to envy to Namibia. I've seen a PS, a permanent secretary, who's not only dedicated, but really committed to support such kind of initiatives. And I've also noticed a Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture, which is a statement by itself. It's taking a stance. Some countries, it's probably just Ministry of Sports and Culture. So it's already saying a lot in terms of how those two fields that are so close to my heart, which are education and arts and culture and creativity, work together. I'm trained as a geographer, so the title, Human Creativity, and how it's vital economic, social, and cultural resources, speaks to me very much, in the sense that it really inhibits all the spaces of creativity, whether in terms of artistic expressions, but also in terms of ways of life, in terms of language, in terms of behaving, in terms of intercultural dialogue, social cohesion, social justice, all these dimensions that are parts, actually, of culture and creativity. And how this human creativity can actually play and embody this vital economic, social, and cultural resources for Namibia. And it will be developed on Namibian terms, and as I said, I feel honored to be invited in a space of reflection. That's it for my introduction. So I've been asked to speak on new opportunities for the creative economies, and this bracket, which actually could, each of these words be a whole module, a whole course. And so I will try to address each of them, reflect on, provide some critical comments on each of these terms and concepts and what it means from a creative economy perspective, identify some of the challenges, and most importantly, what I'll try to do is provide you with some examples from the rest of the continent, which I've had the chance to be exposed to. So, to start with, as I said, when it was mentioned new opportunities, I was really impressed by the fact that there is a strong commitment and an understanding of the strategies that needs to be developed. We often talk about affective labor and the way that cultural workers, creatives, will kind of overwork themselves, self-exploit themselves, just because they're driven by the passion of what they're doing. I guess it's important to look at this context, but also to, again, remember that when we talk about creativity, we talk about art expressions, but also something that is beyond. It was mentioned this morning, creative economy from within and beyond. And I think this is important, because when we see an art piece, we see also a genuine reflection of our society. So it is a mirror. It can be a mirror that is important. The title, New Opportunities, for me was sounding a bit odd, in the sense that I don't think that so much that are novel opportunities, but rather latent. So sometimes my accent will be weird, so please make an effort to understand me. So a latent potential that hasn't been tackled into. And this is about identifying where this potential lies that we haven't invested in so far. So not necessarily something new, but something that hasn't been fully blossomed or fully anchored so far. And then the regional dimension as an opportunity, and I would like to invite actually this specific space of the region to think it beyond itself and also look at not only in restrictive Southern African terms, but also what's going on and what's been happening in other regional organizations in the continent. And ECOWAS, for instance, although there's a lot of things that can still be improved, have been having this division on culture, has been taking seriously that at a regional level, this reflection needs to include arts and culture, and has tried to harmonize cultural policy making at the regional level. So when we talk about multi-sectorial approaches, it's important to remember that, as Florence so brilliantly reminded us, you talk about not just cultural policy in artistic terms, but cultural policy that should involve some form of industrial dimensions. It's something that is by nature transversal. So when we talk about the human creativity or supporting the creative economy, we need to recognize that this won't be just the business of the Ministry of Culture. This has to be the business of other departments, in some cases where education is not part of it, the Ministry of Education, but also Ministry of Employment, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Trade, Taxation, Social Affairs, Tourism, and there will be, and that's a challenge I will come back to, an art of establishing conversation, and that will be the challenges of how you can manage as someone who's in charge of cultural affairs to speak to the employment or the trade person and make it relevant to his agenda. Especially when we think of tourism. So I was just discovering this tourism protocol, the SADC tourism protocol, which to my surprise does not include the Ministry of Culture. And obviously for me, tourism, when you tour to visit some places, it's not happening in a social vacuum, so there are people there, there are creativity and culture that is happening there, but these haven't been involved in the conversation. So how, as someone involved in the sphere of cultural affairs, do I make it relevant to the tourists, to the policymakers or whoever is in charge of the tourism to think and incorporate those dimensions? So the art of plugging into other agendas, if you want. It was mentioned at the press conference where, again, I was very much in wow with the content that was shared yesterday morning, reference that were made to the free trade agreements. So again, these are places, spaces that an economy of creativity needs to occupy, and hence that creatives, whether public, private, or civil society, needs to claim in a way. Last but not least, the investment promotion strategy that was mentioned by the Vice President yesterday, who wanted to grow a critical mass in the production of local art craft. Again, maybe it will be relevant here to speak to the finance, the Ministry of Finance directly, and to make them understand that this is about their sphere of action. So there are these concepts that we can refer to as implicit and explicit cultural policy, and that's basically the way I want to get at, that there are explicit policies that are about culture, so creating an art space, etc. But there are policies that belong to other departments, other ministries, that implicitly has to do with with cultural affairs, and it's important to plug into these. This has to do with also what I refer to as a density of governance. If you want, on a horizontal line, it involves all those different spheres of action, all those different ministries I just mentioned. It has to do also with the scale. And often there's a growing reflection on the importance of collectivities and local governments in transcribing cultural affairs in an everyday reality for ordinary citizens, and the capacity that city mayors have to play a role in this sector because of the proximity between the action and the actual implementation strategy. So again, in terms of scales, relying on different levels of action that exist. Florence was mentioning the possibility for policymakers to rely on UNESCO to get some feedback or some advices or some help in terms of articulating some cultural statistics for the sector. So these are the different, if you want, different levels or scales that can be tackled into and that needs to be occupied. Again, why it matters so much, and it's been repeated again and again, my mentor, who's been doing an incredible work back in Senegal in terms of having us a law that respect the status of artists and that actually allow them to be recognized for their work and be able to perform in the dignity of their profession, always mentioned this extraordinary commodity. So yes, we're talking about business, we're talking about dollars, we're talking about something that you can trade, that you can sell, that you can buy, that you can trade. But there's this extra dimension, and you're just not selling anything. You're selling values, you're selling meanings, you're selling something that I'll come back to, storytelling. You're telling a story, and that's why it matters. Last but not least, when we talk about multi-sectorial forms, a multi-sectorial approach, it's important to keep in mind that there are multiple forms. So it's not just about money. There are ways of facilitating imports for material. I know that Zimbabwe had a statutory instrument, a rebate of duty on equipment imported by a registered arts organization. There are ways to facilitate visa regime. For the anecdote, it was actually easier for me. I have a dual nationality, French and Senegalese, and it was easier for me to come to Namibia with my French passport rather than with my Senegalese passport. So when I was saying looking at what's happening beside the region, it's also important to keep this continental perspective. So again, all about developing enabling environments, as it was mentioned before. So there are many challenges, and as I said, one of the main challenges in terms of multi-sectorial approach will be to be able to develop this art of conversing, this art of conversation, this art. You become brokers. You are already brokers, you know, like you are able to translate one reality into another. That's what creativity is essentially about, whether we're talking about techies or we're talking about artists. It is a capacity of translating a spiritual inspiration into some form of materiality or tangible, something that can be shared with others. So this art of conversing needs to be applied to different ways of establishing partnerships, to something that we turn to, and developing multiple languages. And here I'm not talking about just so multiple languages in a figurative sense, if you want. It's also being proactive, and that's why I really like the last comment that was coming from our Nigerian colleague. The importance of being proactive and in identifying potential synergies. It won't be displayed here. We can collaborate, especially not from a Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Economy or Employment. However, there may be a way to develop a discourse that resonates, and this is this art of conversing that needs to be developed. Then when it's done, the challenge will be to make sure that there will be clear demarcations in terms of responsibilities and in terms of participatory and consultative framework. I'll give you two examples. One has to do with the recent film office that was developed by the Rwanda Development Board, which has not much to do with arts, actually, a bit to do with tourism, but which took a stance that we're going to promote Rwanda as a prime regional, if not continental, location to shoot films. And that's a decision that was made. And again, this is not the Ministry of Culture, which in this case would be the Ministry of Sports and Culture taking the lead, but the development boards, the Rwanda Development Board. which is a very powerful agency of the government that reports directly to the president. Another example of multi-sectorial approaches has to do with some work that Avril and I have been involved in, that is the quadriennial periodic reports of the Convention 2005. So this exercise that every 4 years, countries who've signed the Convention needs to write about the state of the art of the sector. And this is usually the opportunity whereby we send an expert to facilitate some conversation, but also a conversation between members of the civil society as well as policymakers, as well as private sectors, hopefully are being developed and implemented. So again, different instances of spaces that are created to exchange. Now the question, how can we maintain the spaces in the long run so that they don't dissolve as spaces of collaboration? Another term that I was asked to reflect on was the one of partnerships. One in which, and that's a kind of specificity of the continent. I don't like to speak about 54 countries just in a go, but there's one thing that is quite distinctive about the continent is the role of the civil society and how proactive it has been in terms of, and innovative. One of the key roles that has been reflected in the reshaping cultural policy reports, which was mentioned before, has to do with the role of the civil society in terms of collecting data, in terms of monitoring the state of the sector, etc. So having, again, stemming from the premise that the civil society, just like, you know, people who are living on a daily basis in the creative sectors, know best what are its challenges, but also what are its strengths and what are its capacities. So when we talk about partnerships, it's important to recognize that there will be a diversity of stakeholders and there will be a multiplicity of capacity involved. And it's important to value each of these. So again, as it was mentioned before, yes, the government has a role to play. This is what we call public representation. In a hip-hop way, they represent, so they're supposed to represent. And if they don't represent, then we need to change the crew. So there is a social pact, if you want. This is part of the public delegation that the people give, but also the private sector, which has also some form of action and capacity, but also some form of guilt on which we can play on. That's what we call corporate social responsibility. You know, so there is always some room of maneuver that exists, and it's important to recognize all the diversity of stakeholders and to be able to play around it. When we talk about partnerships, there has been an increase on the continent of public-private partnerships, and I am always quite not critical, but dubious, and I like to keep a critical hat and critical glasses whenever I face this kind of development. Essentially, because they're more and more focused on one side of this cultural value chain and cultural chain of production, and which has to do with the consumption. So more and more culture in these public-private partnerships are used to the marketing side of the creative economies. I give you an example. For instance, if you look at the refurbishments of old buildings, or in Cape Town, that will be the biscuit mill. So for those of you who are familiar with Cape Town, that would be like an old mill that was regenerated, but essentially with shops that sells food or whatever, craft, but not really spaces where creatives produce, you know? It's mostly where it gets consumed. Same for recent developments, and this is again thinking of Maboneng, for instance, in Joburg, which is, again, a pocket in the city that is devoted to pure cultural consumption. Rare are the spaces where public-private partnerships has been working towards encouraging the production and the work of creatives. So the key challenge when we talk about partnerships has to do with keeping an eye on the public. If we're talking about public policies and public-private partnerships, it's important to keep an eye on who's the public as beneficiaries. And in this regard, it's quite important to take a decision and make a stance, if you want. Take a stance in terms of whether we want to favor an elitist part of the population, whether we want to encourage rather something that works for the greatest majority, or whether who is it that we are working for, the most vulnerable, the most well-off, what is it that we're doing? Then it's important to balance, again, low-hanging fruits and long-term benefits, again, because different stakeholders, different rationalities, different types of capacities and capabilities, different languages, and different valuing, so different values at stake. So what works for you will not work for actor B, and you need to find a way to balance those two things. And it's important also to keep on looking and keep an eye on the non-usual players. And this, I will give you two examples from Morocco. Yes, it's on the continent, North Africa. And it's from Casablanca. And this is the Bultek, which is a popular music center that was created within a techno park, and there was a festival that was existing, and the guys were just being kicked out from the little place where they used to organize a festival, and this mogul, this person who had this big fabric that was occupied by the techno park, so with techies and all that, decided to give them the kitchens. And the kitchens that were able to be cleared up, transformed into a space where you have now web radio, recording studios, and performance places and offices for the festivals. Another example in terms of non-usual suspects will be the work of Africaina, which is an NGO dedicated to cultural dialogue between on the continent, and cooperation and development, and doing all that, and who actually had its initial funding thanks to a building construction company who actually liked art. But it's just because randomly at the corner of an unexpected conversation, you realize that this person has something that's to which you can relate in terms of arts and culture. So keep an eye for non-usual suspect. These are not the two examples I wanted to give you in terms of partnerships. The two ones I wanted to give you had to do with the Ségou Council for Promotional and Local Economy that was created after the Festival sur Niger. So Festival sur Niger is in Mali, in a secondary city called Ségou, which used to be a capital during the Bambara Empire. And the secondary city decided to become the cultural capital of Mali, and managed. This is a 10-15 years process. And in the process, it was, which was actually initiated by a local operator. By a local operator, I mean a hotel owner who wanted some animation in the city, and who decided to start to make the different people of the city aware of what culture can be and can mean in a city. Okay. The festival was created in this context, but most importantly, the council acts as a public-private partnerships that advises as much policymakers from the city in terms of how to intervene, how to develop strategies and programs that can integrate culture in their approach as it advises and supports local economy actors of the city. The second illustration that I wanted to give, and something that has been referred to several times today, is the Artil Network. One of the projects that we worked on was the African Creative Cities Network that put together, that was basically a proposal made to cities who wanted to engage in this process of exploring what creativity could mean in their city, in their own terms and on their own conditions. And that was a pretext, an excuse for people to sit basically around a common idea, or to try to work on developing a common idea. This took place in 5 cities and were again the occasion for people from the civil society as well as industry and public officials to sit and discuss. And again, what was interesting is that this project were usual suspects, in the sense that it wasn't Dakar Creative City, it was Harare, it was Nouakchott, it was Pointe-Noire, it was Victoria in Seychelles, and it was Ségou. Another example of civil society taking the lead and not waiting and being proactive was, again, our Tail Network creating a vulgarizing video. There's something that was discussed yesterday of there are all those conventions, all these tools that exist, but actually that people don't know about. And so this short 3 minutes video was in a way to translate in concrete terms what this convention means if you are a cultural operator, if you are a creative. And this was done by this Pan-African network and translated in French and English, and then again further translated by other creatives who decided that it was a good initiative and to translate it in Kinyarwanda. In terms of marketing, and I'll be very quick now, because I have two more words to look into. So in terms of marketing, it's essentially being about knowing your market, knowing your product. So what's your position? And what's your unique selling point? What's your value proposition? What is it that you're bringing to the table? But it also draws from your analysis of the cultural value chain, what is missing, where are the bottlenecks in the chain of production of my sector, and what can be created and be compensated. When we talk about the creative economy, we talk about, and creative products, we talk about something that is customer-centric in terms of its model. It's focused on the consumer. So that's why it was so essential, and it was said before, of knowing your audience and cultivating it and nurturing it. And again, this will mean sometimes compromising. There was some discussion yesterday, and I heard about this the third wheel TV program. There might be a stance to be taken in supporting a local content that speaks to your audience, rather than content that is not necessarily reflective. In Dakar, we have essentially Bollywood TV series or telenovelas from Latin America. So, speaking from grounded experience. Last but not least, the experiential economy. You're selling an experience. And it's important to acknowledge that. And this is, I put here 2 examples of this marketing strategy, of this marketing mindset. The one of the Atlantic Music Expo, which is a music market in Cabo Verde, and the Visa for Music, which is also a music professional market. But that goes beyond just being music markets. It's also spaces where you will experience buying African musical products, not from the traditional platforms that you find that are located in the global north, which are the Womex, which are the Midem, etc., etc. So moving the buyers to the continent rather than having to find our way there. The challenges in terms of marketing will be to be able to take a stance and demonstrate a political will. So how far are you able to go beyond just a branding, just a title? And making a coordinated move that is well supported and well resourced. And again, it will be also about balancing. Again, if you talk about this extraordinary commodity, extraordinary, balancing the market-oriented cultural expression with those that are not commercially viable. This is what you're facing when you're talking about the complexity of the creative economy. And 2 examples that I want to look into here is the one of Dakar, which is a contemporary arts biennale. Some of you may have been there. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. It's so great. And it's off. And interestingly enough, it was actually an initiative, state-led initiative, but that gained its proeminence and gained its whole relevance thanks to its off, which was a spontaneous mobilization of citizens 10, 15 years ago, who decided to multiply the proposition of the Biennale. And I finish with this example, which is the Africa Outline, identifying what are the bottlenecks in the chain of production. This is a mobility fund to support exchange between artists from the continent to Morocco in this case. So anyone who wants to collaborate in this regard. I have to pass on all those things. If there's one keyword for technology, remember, it's just a tool. It needs to be embedded in a culture. So what matters is local content. That will be it for technology. There is, in the reshaping cultural policy, Octavio Kulec, who is a consultant who's been working a lot on the digital economy and digital cultural economy, who's been saying that new players have been able to emerge thanks to the technology, but at the end of the day, it will be about remembering that this is just a tool. What matters is the story. So the way of telling it has been multiplied, have been democratized, but what matters is the story. So in the storytelling, in the narrative that we've been talking about before, it's important to keep this in mind. Also, again, there are key examples that exist. If there's time during the question, I will tell you about this Cameroonian film making who's been crowdfunding, but in a very localized way. But there are experiences on the continent that exist and that are relevant. And that's it for, in terms of conclusion. All these elements that I've been asked to reflect on are actually mutually feeding and cross-cutting elements of a product strategy. So it's important to have these in mind. It will be a matter of choices. You won't be able to invest in all the sectors, but it will be rewarding if you have a focused, strategized approach. There are multiple values, there are multiple languages, and there is the art of translation that is involved in this work. And last but not least, in Senegal we say "Nyofar," which means we are together, and it's about creating networks, it's about creating synergies, and it's about creating collaborations within a same sector, outside of this sector, within a country, outside a country, region, continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jenny. You know, I have to apologize. The sadness about these kinds of initiatives is that you invite people that are bringing a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise, and they have prepared. You know, they've taken time out, they've researched, and then you have to hold them to a clock, sadly. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sorry that we at times have to hurry you along. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
The part of marketing challenges, I didn't finish to read them. But then I want to be understood by the House, because my question is to help myself and maybe to help others, if I ask that question. Or maybe I won't put it right, but you are welcome to help me. On the marketing, no matter what we are doing with our initiations or creativity, and we don't have a market, that is a problem. Now, I'm not saying the European market is better, it can bring in money. I'm also taking from our continent. We can also, make money amongst ourselves. But what I have experienced, that's why I'm saying, please understand me. We have been working with people who are coming from Europe in culture and arts. And then the talent or the creativity lies with the local people. They are the ones doing the work. And the person is leading them. And then the market will be searched, for example, from Europe, and the market will be there. And then our items will be shipped to be sold there and in South Africa. And then you will come to the airport in South Africa where you have our local person in the rural area who's on those big boats, because she was so good in doing the basketry. And you are proud, a Namibian to be put up in an airport, outside of your country. And then these items are at Etosha, that is our one of the tourist places famous in the world. And then all these items will be sold there. Just because somebody from Europe is there, you know, looking for the market. As soon as the person goes back, everything goes immediately. So I just want to bring it up so that we look into that matter also. We can, so that, I don't know whether it's the trust that is not there when we do the market ourselves. Why does it go down? Or is it the attitude from outside, or we are not trusted that we can do things for ourselves only when we have somebody from outside that, you know, our local people can benefit, you know, their skills are used. And when the person is away, our markets go down. Thank you very much.
What I would like to ask, I don't know if the question is for you or for in this room. I, as a dance teacher and business owner in the arts, would like to know who I can go to when I want to do something for the community. Lots of years ago, I said I was doing dance classes myself in Swakopmund, but there was no dance school. So I said to my parents, I want to go study dance teaching, to become a teacher, to come back to Namibia and open a school so that the kids have a place to go to dance, or not only kids, which I've done. But of course you need extra sources of income, and I also have a bachelor degree in arts education. So I went to the Ministry of Education in my region and said I would like to teach kindergarten teachers and primary school teachers to teach dance in the schools. But I cannot go to all the schools myself, so I'd like to give a course for teachers. I am available, I have studied this, and then no one came back to me. So after a while, I phoned, I said, have you thought about it? The new year has begun. I'd like to do this. And then the answer was, there's no funding, or our budget is already up. And it's not about budget, it's just, I want to tell them I am available to do this. I want to teach. I want to create this for the kids. I can't do it all myself, and I found a way to actually have other people, how do you say, follow through with it by me teaching them, and they can then teach the children. And where do you go? Who helps you?
I think your question is very clear. Remember that within the room, we also have people from government, and we have the sponsors of this Arts Summit. So I think that deserves a bilateral. Okay, it deserves a bilateral because we cannot attempt to answer it now. Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you because I saw in your presentation you were focused on the business aspect of the industry, and you said that you're selling an experience to the people, you know, by being an artist. And I think that was very important because I'm going to speak especially about Namibians. Namibian artists, especially the younger generation, so I'm speaking from my generation, we are very entitled. We feel like just because you are an artist, Namibians must consume what you're giving them. And there's no quality being put into what you're creating. We're basically saying, I'm a rapper, listen to my music. But what is the intention of your music? What are the hours that have been put into creating this music? And I feel like, so we're so consumed in like, consume my things because you are Namibian, support me because I am Namibian, but I think we should think bigger than that and think, create a quality, because we are very privileged to have the internet and social media. Create quality that can go out into the world, that you can share with people, where they can look at Namibia and be like, this is international level. And we are 2 million people, but we have billions of people on the internet that can consume what we have. And if we do that, actually put the effort and create quality art, products, the world can look at us. And then we don't have to focus on the government anymore to fund us or people to fund us, because the world will be funding us because they appreciate what we're giving them because it is of quality.
Because that's exactly what it is, you know? It's not about enige iets. We get into the mold of enige iets is goed genoeg. Dat is nie goed genoeg nie. It has to be excellent if you'd like it to be consumed the world.
I have a question. My question is creating education for artists to create jobs for themselves and not to rely on being employed. You know, you go to school to create something for yourself. I go to school to study photography. When I come there, I go and I'm employed by someone else, NBC, or go to journalism and stuff like that. Instead of opening up your market like the guy say, opening up your market is very difficult without funds, we know, but a foot into that for a start, always go for well. I want to know that our education, it is educating us to work for someone else, or is it educating us to work for ourselves?
We are actually going to get Dr. Jenny to actually respond. We're in your hands, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Regarding the marketing question, and that's something I'd like to really to make clear. I'm based in UK, but my site is set on the continent, and all the examples I've been given are continent-based, but continent-initiated as well. And that's why I found them so relevant. But to give you a further example, is we need to think, and that links to Khadija's comment, we need to think beyond the traditional remits of what we think to be our markets. As part of the African Creative Cities Network, we went to Harare with the representative from Ségou, Mali, who created this festival and this art cultural centers, cultural center in his city. And we went to Harare and we went to meet Oliver Mtukudzi. And we went to Oliver Mtukudzi, who I think is mostly known here. And we went to see his complex, a whole music complex he created, 2 restaurants, 3 stage, 2 outdoors, 1 indoors, 1 recording studio, 1 film editing studio, 1 33 places in a lodge, in a hotel, and all this created on these funds. And what was interesting is these 2 people who are 2 opposite sides of the continent just didn't know each other. They were doing exactly the same kind of business, in a way, with the same kind of drive and initiative, but they didn't know each other. What leads to this encounter is next year, Oliver Mtukudzi, absolutely unknown on the Malian market, and mostly in West African market, unless you are a music aficionado, was performing there and was setting Ségou on fire. This is expanding your market. This is expanding your marketing opportunities by broadening who are your audience, but who are also your potential partners and networking collaborators. And again, there might have been some failure, and we are specifically in an economy which is about trying and fail, and trying again and failing again, and trying again and failing again. This is at the core of creativity, this try and error. But it's important to keep on trying and keep on multiplying, and most importantly, keep on doing it with our own resources, with our own means, and with our own capabilities. So we ensure that it's representative of our own vision and our own narrative. So I'm not supposed to respond on the school thing, okay? In terms of entitlement, it's not just so she left. Oh, no, she's here. Sorry, Khadija. It's not just Namibia. I think there's a millennium generation that is ingrained with this entitlement. But what is important is it should shake us up in terms of how small our market is, how small our national market is. So that's something that I often say to people in Dakar, and especially because I hang a lot with the hip-hop community, whenever they release a product, they think Dakar. So we are like 3.5 million in Dakar. How many among that population can actually afford to buy your music or come to your concert? You're talking about a very tiny market. Whenever, I don't know, a French or Swiss artist release a product, they think Francophonia. We think Dakar, or you think Namibia. That's an issue with us. We need to have, more ambitions. And ambition comes the rigor of excellence. And it's only there that we can thrive in terms also of our market. Regarding education, I hear you so much. Like and again, I'm drawing on the Senegalese experience where our national arts school has been teaching, the German tradition of the 15th opera, 15th century opera, and we're not teaching the genealogy, music-wise, of what's been going on in the Cayor, in the different region. So there is an issue in terms of building this narrative artistically, but there's also an issue in terms of building our capabilities as adapted to nowadays markets. So we won't have courses on computer-assisted music production. We won't have courses many on management and marketing or fundraising or audience development. All these are now more and more the responsibility of the artist as well, and the cultural operator as well. So yeah, in terms of education, we also need to think of the curriculum that is reflective of the changes in the sector.
My question is probably relating to the issues of marketing. I hear in your presentation you are talking about selling experiences. Then the question is, could you perhaps have the reasons why do many African countries do struggle to sell experiences, especially when we are looking at the intersection of tourism and cultural experiences. And further to that, every time I have seen countries selling their tourism products, they are always putting natural-based attractions in the same bucket list. And I have struggled to see probably, let's say, Victoria Falls being packaged with a cultural festival, for example, or a cultural experience. What could be the motivation? What could be the reasons? Something like that. What could we do so that maybe we overcome such marketing challenges? Thank you.
So one of the great aberration of the continent is that we have most natural sites listed as rather than World Heritage Site, although I don't think that we lack such kind of cultural heritage site. I don't know the context of the Victoria Falls and why a festival hasn't been organized, or whichever kind of creative events on the margin of this touristic location. Did someone try it? Did it fail? I don't know. I can't answer that. However, what I can say is that it's important to when we think of developing whichever cultural or creative product, that it is embedded in a context, and that is relevant to the space that it speaks to. So in terms of this specific example, I'm not quite sure what to answer. It will be valuable to try, but maybe there will be other types of cultural events or cultural activities or initiatives that do not belong to this touristic location that can be created and encouraged. And then to the second layer, I think on some, and that will be me speaking from the experience of more the music perspective. We have been again, the sense of entitlement. Entitlement. Okay, you heard me. Yeah. Like how many live performance I have seen with a CD record player and a guy just emceeing on it. Now there is a tradition of revisiting and having live bands playing, hence also making bridge with different generations and being able to explore different sound, but stage it's a performance, you know. It's not just me coming and, you know, okay, then maybe it is me, but I'm not a performer. But there should be some form of performance. And when you sell something, you sell something that is multi-layered and has a multi-dimensional. And we shouldn't opt for only one unilateral way of transmitting a message. Nowadays, a performance has some visuals, has some. So that's this kind of experience that I was referring to as well. Avoiding the singularity of our products, if you want.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jenny. Can we give a round of applause, please?